It used to stress me out when I would sleep because while I'm sleeping, something really cool happened in the world last night and I missed it because I was sleeping. Your actual job is to do your best at seeing the future and leading your company into it. Write down what you wish you were hearing. Now it's your funeral. People are walking by to say, pay their respects. And instead of saying, man, he built some great businesses. He was a great author. David wrote cool books. He was a great business coach. That's all fine. Is that it? Is that how you want your life summarized?
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Business Coach. I'm your host, David Finkel. In this week's episode, I again have a big treat for you. We brought back Jeff Hoffman. Now, Jeff, for those that don't know, was the co-author with whom I wrote Scale a number of years ago. And Jeff is someone who's been a serial entrepreneur, who's been successful with that part. He's built technology companies and sold them. He's built technology companies and taken them public. Those of you who have ever booked a travel arrangement, like for example, I'm taking a trip coming up soon to Croatia and some other parts of Europe. I booked on booking.com for some of those. The travel expert that I work with booked some of my stays there in some of these beautiful apartments. A website or a business, booking.com and priceline.com, that Jeff was one of the founding team members for. Jeff's gone on and did other types of projects in the business world, from promotions of concert series to creation and producing of successful films. And he's advised thousands of other business owners of how they can make their businesses more successful. In this interview, what I'm hoping you take away from this conversation with Jeff is he talks about innovation, but he makes it really practical. And we're going to get into what I termed the dirty little secret of innovation. Now, most business owners make the mistake that if they only had time away from their business where they could just close the door and focus, they could come up with their own ideas that they need to scale their company. And what they don't realize is that the ideas that they have are not enough. They need to create new inputs. And so you're going to hear Jeff talk about his technique of info sponging. We'll get into the practical coaching suggestions of how to apply that. But for you to create the next golden product for you, the next gold medal product or service or marketplace to serve, requires that you put yourself in contact and intentionally go out to new spaces and new places, to intentionally chase after shiny objects, but to do that with boundaries around it so that you put some time there, but not too much time there. And how do you make that balance? That's a portion of what Jeff and I talk about in this conversation. So without further ado, here's that conversation with my good friend, Jeff Hoffman. Well, Jeff, welcome back to The Business Coach. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I'm thrilled about that. So I wanted to start off today by asking a different question. Who is a business owner that you came across somewhere in the last 30 days that you saw do something really interesting as he or she was growing their business, that you took that away and said, hey, I just learned something new from this particular business owner that I can put into my toolbox?
Probably it was somebody in the fitness industry. And they had created a fitness app. So I'm just reacting to your question. Somebody that I was impressed with what they did to sell to consumers in a pretty competitive market. And then they went to expand their market. They went to gym owners. They went to a lot of gyms and said, how do we get you to will rev share if you will market this to the people that come to your gym? And so that was their singular focus. We need more people that exercise to use our app for exercise. And so we'll ask gym owners where people go to exercise to help market it. But in the process of visiting those gym owners and spending afternoons visiting the gyms, they discovered the gym owners focusing on other things than just designing the fitness routine, which is what their app does. They realized that the gym owner's life had a whole bunch of other things that they weren't aware of because they were only talking to the customer, the consumer, and not the gym. And they wound up pivoting significantly. And now they went from B2C to B2B, and their revenue is growing way faster. And they're closing sales way faster as a B2B company But my point was that you asked what was something interesting they did. They came in and their question was that they came in the door with was how do we incent you to help us sell our product to your customers? But instead, they decided to ask a completely different question. By the way, even though it's not related to our business now, tell us what you struggle with. How does your business run? How are you trying to grow? Because most people, David, as a business owner, you're in there trying to grow your business. But out of curiosity, he said, tell me about how you're trying to grow your business, right? It'd be an example if you were selling a medical device to a hospital. You would go to the hospital and say, let's talk about how to sell my device inside your hospital. But you would never say to them, what are your strategic goals and what are you trying to do for what are you measuring? What's your dream for your hospital? You don't usually ask that because that's not your problem. That's what they did that I thought was different. They said, look, we're not really here. We're not a tool to help gyms grow, but just out of curiosity, what does it take for gyms to grow? And they found out there was way less competition and way more budget in that market, and they pivoted. So I was like, that was a cool idea to just ask the customer, what's your growth plan, even though I'm not here to help you with that.
That fits really well into an area I wanted to dive into, which is this. I remember in the past when we've had conversations, we would call this reading the world, but this idea of how do we go out there and let ideas wash over us to see broader than what we see today, right? Now that most of our audience, Jeff, they've built successful companies. They're either still in that owner-reliant stage, starting to break through that part, or they've broken through some of the core reliances and now they're in that rapid growth stage. And so a good part of their role as a leader of a business is no longer being the day-to-day person managing the operation of the business. It's now, where do we go next? What's coming down the road? How do we be prepared in a world that's changing pretty rapidly? What are some of your thoughts about how we in today's world can make sure that we stay relevant and far enough ahead of where our thinking is? Because so many of us build businesses that are great for what the world was, yet if we don't change, the world will move on. Kind of like that Laverne and Shirley where they put the glove on the conveyor belt of beer and watch it go away and wave as they stay still there in their conveyor belt job. I love that you can get that reference. So many of my clients now are in their 30s and 40s. They look at me like I'm crazy. Laverne and who?
Nope, I remember the episode. That's why I'm laughing. So I think, well, not think, that is specifically why for me, I created my info sponging idea, which you know about. The world, so let me even back up a level higher. It used to stress me out when I would sleep because while I'm sleeping, something really cool happened in the world last night. And I missed it because I was sleeping. And I'd wake up in the morning and I would think, I wonder what just happened that might be industry changing, if not world changing, or a major trend. And someone's going to spot it before me and take advantage of it. Right. And so I started then kind of profiling I was blessed enough to become friends with some of my business heroes, the people who I admire most. So I got a chance to study them up close to try to figure out what are they doing that everybody else isn't. And it turns out there was an answer. And the answer is the rest of us. So let's say that healthcare is your business. What do you do all day? Healthcare stuff. What articles do you read? Healthcare, right? What events do you go to? Healthcare. If I walked up to you and said, hey, David, I know you're in healthcare, but I'm going to a banking conference. Do you want to go? You'd be like, Jeff, why would I spend my day at the banking conference? I'm in healthcare. You wouldn't do it. But then I started studying these innovators and they're like, yeah, let's go. And I was like, what do you mean, let's go? You're in healthcare. And they're like, yeah, but maybe banking has come up with some ideas that no one in healthcare has thought of. So the idea of InfoSpon, I noticed they all did that. They have a wider view of the world than everyone else. Now, people's answer that are listening is like, I don't have time to go to a banking conference. You're right. Most of your time needs to be spent on your healthcare business. So the concept that I came up with to emulate that I just call info sponging, is the first 20 minutes of every day. That's it, 20 minutes a day. If you can't do this daily, do it every other day, do it once a week. For the first 20 minutes, when I start my day, I don't work at my company and I don't work in my industry. And I spend 20 minutes to go see what's going on in the rest of the world. When I'm done, which means I read one article, watch one video, talk to one person, I go learn one new thing a day. And here's the key, David, that I don't need to know. Like, if you've been wondering, what is AR, augmented reality? So, you know what I do? I just say, you know what? I don't use AR. It's not in my business. But for my info sponge today, I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes and I'm going to go read an article and figure out what augmented reality actually is. At the end of each info sponge, I write down one sentence summary of what I've learned. And then frequently I leave all those sentences near me and I just look at them because you're trying to see a pattern in the data of what's coming. By the way, one day, I even did it physically. I would drive by this on the way to my office, this company, and the name of the company was weird. And every day I'd drive by and I'd be like, I wonder what they do. And then I started thinking these innovators actually schedule time to pick up shiny objects, right? The rest of us say, I don't have time for that. You're right. Then just limit the time. So I was like, well, I got my 20 to 30 minutes of info sponge time. This is what I'm going to use it for. So I finally made a U-turn after a million months. And I pulled up and I went in and I said, what do you guys do? And the owner was there. He goes, okay, that's a weird reason to come in the business. You don't even know what we are. I said, I'll be honest with you. I drive by every day. I see your sign and I wonder to myself every day what this company does. So today I just pulled it in the parking lot. And he said, let me show you something we helped pioneer. It was called 3D printing. He was one of the first 3D printers in the country. And so we were able to get involved in it early just because I made a U-turn to check out a sign that I was driving me crazy. So that's my answer is schedule time every day or every week to go look at the rest of the world, stuff you don't need to know that has nothing to do with your business, and keep notes. And eventually you start to find things you say, oh, wait a minute. And the people that innovated industries, when I started talking to them, they quote stole ideas from every other industry. That's why they thought of something no one in your industry did.
You know, Jeff, I remember when you first shared this back when we were writing the first edition of Scale. And so I started back then with magazines and I started getting a whole bunch of different subscriptions to magazines that I would normally not read. And I would take them on a plane and I had my Sharpie marker with the clickable Sharpie marker, right? Nowadays, various times I'll go ahead and resubscribe to a big, like for example, Apple News, and I'll go through different magazines that I normally would not read. And I noticed when I've shared this with clients and said, hey, this is something that someone shared with me, it's made a difference. What I notice is they're so fixed in the type of information they consume that I've got some clients who love hunting. I've got other clients that are very much environmentalists in a different way. And I've got other clients that are really into sports and some that are, but they get in their own little worlds and they just don't see broader. So I love what you had said, which is to something I don't need to know and summarize it in the sentence. I think that's great. Your comma, schedule time to pick up shiny objects with boundaries. I wrote that down. That's my takeaway from today so far. I love that.
That's exactly, you summarized it very well because the boundaries is why people don't do it. They're like, I don't have time to be distracted. And so the answer is then put a wall up. You're allowed to be distracted and pick up shiny objects till 9 o'clock. You can't pick one up at 9:01. You have to go back to work.
That's right.
So having the discipline to allow that free roaming time for your mind, but not letting it distract you from the rest of your day.
And then the follow-on that I started doing based on your idea of info sponging, I started asking two questions. One question was, how does X apply to my business, or how could I apply this? And then I noticed I had lots of conversation with that question, was like, well, it doesn't, it can't, it won't. So I started asking a different question, which was, how could a piece of X apply to my business?
Okay.
And I started getting really useful ones because I noticed I was throwing away because 10% or 90% didn't fit for me. I was throwing away this gem of 10 or 50% that if I had just been more willing to see that. And I noticed that the resistance for me oftentimes was, it was new and different. And so I just didn't want to believe that was relevant or true. So I love that.
Yep, you're exactly right. Maybe just a piece of the concept will fit. But again, If you go study the most innovative people in every industry, they brought ideas from outside the industry. They were the first ones to say, hey, maybe we could make this work in healthcare.
When I see the way some of the people I know, like yourself or other folks who are incredibly successful at serial businesses, one thing I notice is that they get really good at getting quickly to the core of a new business. And so I think that as a person who's built a coaching practice, a coaching business, is one thing that's given me as a gift is I'll commonly say, if I were running your company, here's what comes to mind. Here's what I would ask. Here's where I might see something different than you're seeing. And I noticed that type of thinking wherein if you're a business owner, I love the idea that you can go out to your peer group in your community or wonderfully beyond that and pretend that you own these different businesses and talk to these people and say, well, if I were them, what might I see that they're not seeing, just to build a bigger data set or toolbox. I'm curious, does that spark anything for you? Because I know that you naturally do this.
Yeah, it's funny because where you started out, the part that I naturally do that I think actually sometimes even irritates people is what you said, which is try to drive really hard to the simplest explanation of why your business exists. I literally, before you and I started recording, got off a call. It was a European company, but I got off a call where I had to point out that this is the fourth time I've had to ask, what is your real value to me as a customer? Because I still don't get it. And so this is like many people listening to us, this is a business that's generating revenue. They actually have customers, but what they're trying to figure out is why they grow X% a year. It's a slow organic build. And I was involved with some companies that had this crazy exponential growth. And they're like, why don't we hit that kind of acceleration? And so I started saying, well, I'm pretending that I'm pitching your business now. I said, okay, I kind of did what you said. All right, so I'm your head of marketing. What am I selling? I said, explain to me what I'm telling customers and what I'm selling. And so I tried to pretend I said, I'm going to pitch your company for you, but I couldn't figure it out. And I kept saying, it's not clear to me, so I don't know how to be your marketing guy. I can't quite figure out what the real exciting value prop is. I can see why we're making sales, but I don't see us catching fire. But I did what you said in a different way. I didn't say I own the business. I said, I'm your new head of marketing. Why don't you guys prep me to go out and pitch the business? And I just couldn't get there. So yes, I completely agree with you to look at, and you want people to do that for you, right? Like you were doing and I was doing, to look at another business and say, what can you see that they're not seeing? And how would you do it different? I want people to tell me that. If you were me, what would you do?
I love that last comment. I want to riff off that for a moment. So I can remember an exercise we took with some of our advanced clients that had larger companies, anywhere from 20 to $100 million companies. And we had them put each business on a hot seat, and we had them brainstorm in groups about solving their biggest challenge. And I noticed a pattern. I stopped people for this. I said, look, I noticed there's a lot of deflector shields, a lot of Star Trek deflector shields going on here. And rather than looking for all the reasons why the feedback you're getting doesn't fit or isn't directly on point or is wrong, what's happening is you're finding what's off versus saying, where does this idea move us to? How can this idea start me to do my thinking from a new spot, a new part with that? Why do you think that business leaders or business owners, they really struggle when it's easy for them to give ideas to other businesses and to play that half of it, but the idea is unsettling, or they behave as if it's unsettling to them, they're resistant to it,
so
on the other way around?
I think it's because you accept as a business owner, especially you're doing all right. You've had success. Your business is making money and you've had growth. So therefore you believe that the way you're doing it is the quote right way to do it. What we're doing must be right because it's working. And I've only ever done one TED talk, but I actually said in this TED talk, I said, let me tell you the three most dangerous words in business. And during my talk, I wrote them on the wall and I wrote, we're doing fine. So that's the issue. your business is working and all these people are giving you new ideas and you're saying you're going to you're going to destroy my business. You people don't get it. It's working. So why are you telling me to do something different? And we're telling you to consider something different because it could be working times 10. But what you see is it ain't broke. Why is everybody trying to fix it? So that's the deflector shield. They're thinking to themselves, these people they wish they had a business like mine. And I'm thinking, no, but you wish you had 10x of that business. So quit deflecting all these ideas. So I do an experiment similar to yours, which I think we included in Scale, where I frequently hand people a marker and a blank whiteboard. And I say, your company doesn't exist. And you're starting it over right now, today in 2025. Let's draw it. If you were starting your company from scratch today, let's talk about what you would build, how you would build it, what it would do, how it would operate, what tools would you use, what technologies would you use. You get to start from scratch. You don't have to worry about budget. Let's redesign your business today. And what we discovered was if you're giving yourself the mental freedom to start over, you would do a lot of things different. And so, yet, the reason you're not doing those things today, even though they were great ideas in this exercise, is because you're like, I already have a business that already does this. So you feel like you're stuck with something. If your business is failing, you're wide open. Yeah, man, I got to do something different. But when your business is going well, you don't listen well because you keep thinking, if it ain't broke, why are we fixing it? And the answer is you're not fixing it, you're upgrading it, you're upskilling it. So that, David, I think is where they get stuck. And they're not open as much because they think we're trying to fix something that ain't broken.
I just wrote that down. You're not fixing it, you're upgrading it. That's a fantastic statement with that. And I see it. I see business owners who have had growth, they've gotten to a certain level of success, and maybe the business is making $500,000 of profit, $2 million of profit, $3 million of profit. And the owners, you can see how they get a little bit closed. And yet you look at who are the people who grow and add a zero to those numbers. Those are the ones who are hungry to get new and different perspectives. And the person who gets stuck, it's interesting where ego and fear get in the way. They don't want to their own mind, appear less than. And it's fascinating. On the front end, they were open, they were hungry to learn. And the point where if they could just get past that, they would be open and hungry to learn. It's that upper end of that middle part that if they're not careful, it's almost like they draw a constraining circle around themselves. And I like to say that the business owner has to grow for their business to grow. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. And that constraining circle they draw around themselves is the one I said a minute ago. It's the one called we're doing fine. I'm doing fine. I don't need all these people telling me all these ideas. Actually, you do, because you could be doing a lot more than fine if you would open your mind and you would consider those things. So we're not, like I said, our answer to it ain't broke, don't fix it. You and I just agreed on, we're not trying to fix it. We didn't say it was broke. We're just upgrading it. Actually, in the video gaming world, we're leveling up.
That's right.
It's to level up. Take it, man.
That's great. That's great. I want to ask you, so how do you stay yourself sharp this way? I mean, the technology in the world's changed a lot. You've got AI has become such a big part. I mean, we were talking earlier, I'm going to just go back in my notes. I've got 4 pages of notes so far as we're doing this here. But on this page here, you were talking about this idea of going out in the world and doing your info sponging. So I had a client who was telling me, it was really fascinating. He has a business where he owns and manages a lot of apartment complexes, several thousand units in total. And his comment was, he was telling about a new AI tool that will answer phones and deal with what his biggest headache is, making sure the phone gets answered well to set up a prospective resident to come do a tour of an apartment, but it has to be answered every single time to get them to show up for a tour. And his comment, when he does it, he has his staff that works with the different property management companies checking daily to make sure the phones are being answered. And he's like, I can't believe it. This tool will answer the phones and do it reasonably well every time. So I'm curious, because that was a new one to me. It never occurred to me to think about, could an AI tool do that? What are some of the ways that you push yourself to make sure you don't stay satisfied with what you know whether it's technology or other places, but that you really find yourself fun staying relevant with the changing world? I know we talked about info sponging, but how do you go beyond just the ideas to play with some of the applications, which is what's needed to learn? And I'll use that word play intentionally.
Yeah. So, by the way, it's not always me, but in every company, somebody's job should be, in the old days, that was called R&D, right? Somebody's job should be futuring. Let's just make up a verb. It might be me, but it might not. It's probably based on the size and profitability of your business. It might not even be a full-time person. But having somebody in the company that has scheduled time to go play with things is super important. By the way, part of the place I learned that was Google, because Google has that program. If you're caught up on your work every other Friday, you can just go to the lab and play with stuff, right? They want employees, and you can work on stuff that has nothing to do with your job. The catch is Google owns whatever you invent in there. But instead of saying, somebody walks in and you're playing with some AI glasses and they're like, David, what are you doing? Right? And you're like, I just thought these were cool. I wanted to play with them. Most companies would be like, that's not your job. Can you? Everybody's like, we got to make our numbers. Right? So they're always focused on the what's nose to the ground, what's right in front of us. We got to make our numbers. And you're sitting there thinking, maybe with these AI glasses, we could make 10 times those numbers. But the typical business owner slash manager is thinking you're playing with a toy instead of doing your job. Your actual job is to do your best at seeing the future and leading your company into it. That's not the way business owners think. I don't pay you to play with tech toys. Actually, you should, is my answer.
Yeah.
Right? So again, you could say, David, every Friday, just every Friday, every other Friday, from noon until you go home, I want you to go down the hall to the conference room and just play with stuff. We'll pay for it. Tell us what you want. I want to get some Oculus glasses and play with them. I want to get one of these handheld translation, I'm making stuff up, translators, and play with it. So investing R&D time. So to your question, it's not always necessarily me, because there might be somebody that I think will do a better job of it. I do a lot of that in my case because I am an engineer. But for someone listening, if it's tech and you're not really the tech person, then maybe it's someone in your company. But I'm really glad you brought that up, because if you don't have somebody playing with the next generation of toys, you're going to fall behind, because your competitor, you gave a great example. Your competitor's phone answering, their clients are way happier because they have an AI handling the phone. You still have people, you're still getting complaints, and people are saying, you know what? I like it way better when I call your competitor. I get an answer right away on the phone. Your people are inefficient. Why? Because you didn't even know that product existed, because you had nobody out there playing with stuff and experimenting.
And I take three things from what you just shared there. One is, it doesn't have to necessarily be the listener, him or herself, if that's not their thing. Number two, we put some boundaries around it. It's not like this is going to be 50 hours of their work week. This is going to have some boundaries, right? We talked earlier about putting boundaries about picking up bright, shiny objects. Let's do that sometimes. But let's do that within reason with our info sponging for 20 minutes or for an hour or two, not for 2 or 3 weeks. And I think that we could probably extrapolate from that. There's going to be waves in the business of real intense sprints. That's all hands on deck to get the next release or something else. And other times when we have a little bit more freedom, the wave set came through and now we can drift in the ocean. And then the third thing I take from that part is, you didn't say it explicitly, but it's built in with that. If the owner of the business stays tech afraid, they tend to populate that into their, when I say technology is not necessarily digital stuff, it could be other types of tools. Tools can be new systems or other types of things, but they have to be willing to step in there. So for example, we have for our coaching clients, we have our Maui app. It has the planning tool. And one of the tools in there is a big rock report. It's a way for people to plan out what's the most important 1 or 2 big rocks for the coming week. At the end of the week, I regroup. What are my victories? What were my challenges? What were my other updates? And I know for me that if I don't get in there and do a big rock report regularly, then I'm not doing leadership well. And so, for example, part of me can say, I don't want to learn about this new way of going about doing something. What I've done it isn't broke, right? The other, but what you're inspiring our audience, I think, is upgrade and do it from a state of play. You might not have to be the one who's going to do the application for your business, but don't be afraid of getting in there and playing around with it, and be willing to spend some money on either staff or bring in some third-party vendors and say, look, this is your world. I don't want to create a blank check here, but if we were to create a test pilot, how could you bring this new way of looking at it to our business at a price we feel good about? Let's set up some parameters for this pilot. Show us what you think this can do. And if you can create value, and we'll describe what that is for us, you have the leg up to get the next sale, which is to have us do more with you to create more value for us. Thoughts as that sparks for you?
Yep. So a company you've probably looked at, people should study. So in the small electrics, I think in home appliance market, they claim that over 80% of all new innovations came from one company, Whirlpool. So when you ask people to name some of the world's most innovative companies, you'll say Google or Apple or whatever. You wouldn't think Whirlpool. In fact, you'd be wrong. Whirlpool is one of the most innovative companies in the world because they actually do what you just said, David. They actually do seed pilots. They have a program where if you raise your hand and say, I got this kind of cool idea, I don't know if it's going to work. You pitch it to a committee. They have a committee, interdisciplinary, interdepartmental. If you can talk the committee into, you know what, we should let David go play with those AI glasses, right? They will actually, it's never long, it's usually weeks and a little bit of money. So they'll say, David, here's $7,500 and 3 weeks. Go figure out how to use those at our company. And they'll tell your teammates, you guys are going to have to cover for him for 3 weeks. And because of their culture, nobody says, that's not fair. Now we have to do extra work. They say, go, David, go. Because if his idea works, this company wins. So amazing corporate culture where they seed experiments and they allow employees some time and a little bit of cash to go do a proof of concept. Is there something there? And you have to convince a committee first. If no one can see it, they tell you thanks anyway. But their model is brilliant. And it's a model that says we actually not only encourage, but we will give you time to convince us to proof of concept cool ideas that are way out there.
Jeff, you can't see it in my notes, but
smart way to do business. So just encouraging people, go research the sort of innovation lab at Whirlpool and see if you can emulate even a 10% version of that.
It's brilliant. And whenever I'm listening or reading, I take notes. And one of the notes I put is I put my LOI, my line of inquiry. So I've got that marked down here that I'm going to never would have occurred to me. I mean, there are Whirlpool appliances. I've owned some over the years for various homes. It never would have occurred to me, going back to what you were saying earlier about info sponging. How could somebody in banking have something to teach me in medical? Well, how could an electrical appliance company have something to teach me in my business coaching world? But what I'm hearing here is probably quite a bit if I'm willing to have some curiosity and some spirit of adventure, a little bit of playfulness, and some deliberate intention to go learn about that. I think that's
absolutely.
The last area I want to just move over to in our conversation, we're going to jump over to something completely different here.
Okay.
So, a lot of people who are listening or watching this podcast, Jeff, with the business coach, they either are at or they're soon to be at, or certainly someday will be at a point where they're making a decision. Do they want to exit from their company, or do they want to stay owning just in a different role, whether it's as active or perhaps more passive in their businesses with that part? And they think about what's the next act after that part. Now, you're someone who's done that. You've created multiple acts in your life, whether it be life after Priceline to, how in the world did you ever have the chutzpah to go produce movies? You think about how does someone do that? You did it very intentionally with Cabin Fever and the horror genre, which actually it makes sense as you described to me how those make money versus the others. But so you've moved into other businesses, you moved into some nonprofit, but what input would you give to somebody about how they gracefully succeed in what comes next after that exit in some fashion so that they can have meaningful life beyond just the money and the financial successes, which dominate early on and probably erroneously so. But what kind of advice would you have for them? What kind of coaching?
Yeah, I did the unplanned exercise. Unfortunately, my best friend drowned in a tragic accident at 42. And I was asked by his family to do the eulogy, and I needed a moment to collect myself before most difficult speech I would ever give in my life, was saying goodbye to my best friend. And so I'm sitting in the crowded room where the funeral is going to be, and I'm listening to people talk about my best friend. And when it's your funeral, guess what people are doing? They're summarizing your life. They're summarizing you. And they're talking about Michael. And I'm thinking to myself, no, that's not what he wants to be remembered by. That's not the description of who or what he was or what he did. And I was like, oh, if he was here, he'd be so upset that this is how they're summarizing his life. So that gave me a thought. And I took out a sheet of paper and I wrote down what I would challenge everybody listening. Take out a sheet of paper, but you have to be really honest and write down, if today was your funeral, what do you think people would be saying? And I think people would say something about Priceline or UBID or business success or money that we made or something. And I was like, yikes, right? Or somebody might say, David had a really nice house. You ever see that guy's house, right? What do you honestly think people would be saying about you if today was your funeral? And I wrote it down and I looked at it and I said, that is not what I was hoping for. Just like Michael would not be happy with how people were summarizing him. And then underneath that, I drew a line and I did a second exercise. Write down what you wish you were hearing. Now it's your funeral. People are walking by to pay their respects. And instead of saying, man, he built some great businesses. He was a great author. David wrote cool books. He was a great business coach. That's all fine. But is that it? Is that how you want your life summarized? So the second thing I did was I wrote down what I wish they would say. And I will tell you what I wrote. The first one, what I think they'd say, is talking about our businesses and our business success. What I wish they'd say is, each person would say in some way, my life was better because that guy was in it, right? I wanted to be judged not by the number of exits or deals that I did, but by the number of other people's lives I made better. So once I looked at that, then I flipped the paper over and there was a third list. What are you actually doing with your life to possibly make section 2 come true? Are you actually doing that? Or are you just starting another company now so you can get another exit? Now you're going to buy a beach house instead of a lake house. All those things are fine. But if it's all you're doing this for, right? And so it wasn't until I did that exercise, what would people say about me now? What do I wish they would say? And what do I have to do with whatever's rest of my life to make the one I want true to actually come true? And that's when I said, well, I need to actually get busy changing other people's lives. And then I sat down as a business person, like all the people here, as an entrepreneur, very goal driven. I said, how do I do that? And that's how our nonprofit started. I was like, well, I need to create an organization. Then I need to build a team. Then I need to set objectives. Your skill set of running a business is fine, but I said, I'm going to apply the same skill set that made us profitable in business. I'm going to apply that to figuring out how to help improve other people's lives. So our nonprofits grew successfully because we used our business owner skills to build them just like it was a business. But the end product wasn't profit. The end product was doing something to help make other people's lives better. So that's kind of, if you don't ever have that thought, you're going to wake up one day and it's too late, right? You're going to wake up and say, I did a great job in business, and congratulations. That's a meaningful thing. But that may be all people have to say about you, because that's really all you did. Until I became cognizant of it and took it as a goal the same way I do business goals, I didn't do anything about it.
I think that's profound, this idea of looking at what is it we really want to be leaving after we're gone as a way, as a pathway to live our life better here and now. And I think probably there's no better way of ending this conversation, Jeff, than saying, thank you, you've made our lives better from this conversation, from your work, for your contribution. I know how many people have come up to me at various conferences and say, David, your book that you did with Jeff Scale made a difference. I've gone through it 3 times. You should see my copy. I've got notes everywhere. No,
Heard that as well.
and so I thank you for that. And I'll just share on a personal level here. Every time we have some time together, which I know as life's past becomes rarer, it's a treat for me. I leave feeling inspired to be a better version of myself. And I just want to say thank you for that.
Well, thank you, David. That definitely means a lot to me coming from you. So thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. So here we are at the end of another episode here of The Business Coach. I want to make sure that next week when you tune in, between now and then, I want you to have taken something that Jeff shared with you today and you've done something with it. Maybe you've started to info sponge. Maybe you've started to do this exercise of your 3 sections of your fictional future of the funeral, but do something with it. Don't just listen passively. Do something with it. Jeff, on behalf of everybody, thank you. And we're done here today. Head
All
on
right,
off and do
friend,
something
thank
fun.
you. And I do have to run as well, but I obviously hope our paths cross again.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, buddy.